You step outside one morning and the world feels different. The air tastes sweet, almost metallic, but it tingles in your throat like ozone after a lightning strike. Within seconds, your heart is racing. Your pupils dilate. Your thoughts are charging at the speed of light, but none of them make sense. You look at your neighbor, and she's sprinting barefoot through traffic, laughing manically. Sirens scream from every direction, but nobody seems to care. Your phone trembles in your hand with breaking alerts. Unidentified airborne neurostimulant detected in global atmosphere. Then it hits you. This is not temporary. This is not a gas leak. This is your new normal. Every breath you take is laced with a drug designed to keep you wired, euphoric, paranoid, and ultimately broken. You cannot hide from it. You cannot breathe without it. And worst of all, no one is coming to save you. Welcome to the first day of a world addicted to methamphetamine, not by choice, but by atmospheric design. How did we get here? What could possibly flood the very air we depend on with one of the most destructive chemicals in human history? It happens in the year 2032, just 7 years from now. The incident begins quietly, far from the public eye, inside a hyper-secretive biotech facility in Kazakhstan. Scientists there were developing a revolutionary air-scattering nanomaterial for combating climate change. Tiny, reactive particles designed to regulate atmospheric chemistry. But one strain of experimental delivery mechanisms, dubbed AMX-9, was hijacked during a cyber attack by a radical anarcho-nihilist group calling themselves the Black Signal. They rewired the codebase to bind the AMX-9 system to synthetic methamphetamine, not just any street drug, but a molecularly perfected lab-grade compound 20 times more potent than anything previously synthesized. The idea was to cause global disobedience, to crash order from within. They succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The altered AMX-9 particles were released simultaneously from multiple points in the upper atmosphere, carried by high-altitude drones. By the time world governments detected what was happening, it was too late. The particles had spread through the jet stream, binding with water molecules in the air and drifting invisibly across every continent. Within 36 hours, the entire breathable atmosphere had become a low-dose methamphetamine fog. It was undetectable by sight or smell, and unavoidable. Masks failed, filters clogged, and humans, one by one, began to change. At first, it felt like energy, like the world had collectively consumed an endless dose of confidence and invincibility. Productivity surged, creativity spiked. Then came the paranoia, the hallucinations, the jaw-grinding insomnia, and finally, the outbursts. Street fights became routine. Social trust collapsed. No government could function with officials who had not slept for days and were screaming about invisible insects. And still, no cure existed because the drug was not inside you. It was in the air. This is not just a story of addiction. This is a story of extinction, of mutation, of a civilization turned inside out by the very thing it breathes. You are not meant to survive this. The planet itself has become a trap, and you are about to see exactly why you will not survive when the air is permanently laced with meth. To understand how everything spiraled, we must start at ground zero. When the meth first entered the skies and changed the atmosphere forever. You are standing on a sunlit rooftop in Almaty, Kazakhstan, watching a fleet of high-altitude drones drift across the horizon, their black silhouettes slicing across the clouds like silent predators. From a distance, they seem harmless, just surveillance machines or weather monitoring systems, but they are not. Each drone is equipped with a payload of nanomaterial capsules coated in what was supposed to be a breakthrough in climate engineering. These capsules were designed to regulate atmospheric carbon by chemically binding to pollutants and dispersing harmless compounds, a miracle of science. That was the plan. Inside the underground lab, several miles away, chaos erupts. Security systems scream. Terminals flash with corrupted code. A foreign script, looping endlessly on every monitor, reads, "Obedience ends today." The lead scientist, Dr. Irina Melikova, is frozen in place, staring at the override log. The drones were launched without authorization. The chemical payloads, she realizes with growing horror, are not what they were engineered to be. The test simulations had been hijacked. AMX-9 nanocarriers have been reprogrammed remotely, invisibly, to carry something else entirely. Not climate solution molecules, but synthetic methamphetamine. Within seconds, the drones complete their deployment at 80,000 feet. The capsules burst open like dandelions against the wind, releasing trillions of engineered particulates into the upper atmosphere. The compound is designed to bond with moisture and diffuse with extreme efficiency. It disperses not over hours, but within minutes, carried by the planet's high-speed jet stream. The result is a silent storm of invisible intoxication. There is no smell, no color, no alarm to alert the world that the very substance that drives breath and life has become the carrier of an artificial stimulant. By the time the emergency transmission reaches Geneva, New York, and Tokyo, it is already too late. In just 12 hours, the particle cloud has begun to descend over Europe and Asia. Within 24 hours, it has circled the equator. Weather balloons confirm what the air control agencies fear most: methamphetamine molecules. Piggybacking on nanocarriers, have saturated every breathable layer of Earth's atmosphere. They are chemically stable, heat-resistant, and designed to persist for decades. Worse, they are inhaled in microscopic doses with every breath. At first, nothing seems wrong. The air still smells like air. Birds chirp. The sky is blue. But deep in the lungs of every living human being, the nanocarriers are doing their work. They slip past the alveoli bypass filters and begin releasing their payload in pulses. Tiny, timed releases designed to mimic sustained stimulation. It's like every human has suddenly been plugged into a neurochemical for drip. Heart rates rise, alertness sharpens, blood pressure spikes, and for a few glorious hours, the world feels supercharged. The initial public reaction is one of disbelief. News headlines call it a mysterious productivity wave. Workers report finishing projects in record time. Sleep becomes optional. People feel invincible. The streets are buzzing, literally and figuratively. In Mumbai, traders on the stock exchange break into song between floor sessions. In Berlin, hundreds of cyclists ride through the night, unable to stop moving. In Tokyo, 1,000 karaoke bars stay open for 3 straight days, no one needing rest. Social media explodes with speculation. Did the government release something? Is this 6G? I haven't slept in 40 hours, and I've never felt better. But then come the crashes, the panic attacks, the hallucinations. What was initially written off as a strange coincidence now becomes undeniable. Medical clinics are flooded. People complain of crawling sensations beneath their skin, jaw clenching, nosebleeds, racing thoughts, violent mood swings. Then the tremors begin. Motor coordination falters. Speech becomes erratic. Friends begin turning on each other, accusing each other of sabotage, betrayal, or spying. Relationships crumble in seconds. A father in Brazil strangles his son during dinner, convinced the boy is wearing a wire. A mother in Johannesburg sets fire to her house with her children inside, believing it is a cloning facility. By day 3, hospitals collapse. Staff are not immune. Doctors and nurses themselves begin to behave erratically. Surgeons abandon operating tables mid-procedure, claiming the patient is a hologram. Paramedics crash ambulances into storefronts while arguing with voices in their heads. Call centers go dark. Emergency broadcast systems start airing gibberish. The voice of broadcasters frantically slurring their way through improvised conspiracies. In government facilities, the situation becomes even worse. Presidents, prime ministers, diplomats, all of them breathing the same poisoned air, begin unraveling. Meetings devolve into shouting matches. Alliances fracture. Accusations fly. Global summits become brawls. A G8 summit ends with 3 leaders hospitalized after a fistfight over whether the moon is watching them. The United Nations declares a global state of emergency, but its statements are so incoherent, most people assume it's satire. Nations close borders, not to prevent war, but to prevent the spread of ideas that no longer make sense. The truth is simple but horrifying. This is not a localized event. This is not a regional leak. This is planetary saturation. Air itself has become the vector of human collapse. People try to flee, but to where? Submarines, space stations, underground bunkers. But none are safe for long. Submarines resurface for air. Bunkers develop leaks. And the International Space Station, the last refuge of breathable purity, soon shuts off contact after detecting trace particles in its filtration system. No one is untouched. No one is safe. The original hackers, the Black Signal, never issue a second statement. Some believe they died from their own release. Others believe they went underground, watching gleefully as the world buckles under its own madness. The irony is sharp. A drug once feared in the shadows of addiction has now become universal, democratic, and absolute. You do not choose to take it. You are chosen by air, by breath, by biology itself. Scientists scramble to develop antidotes or counter nanoparticles, but every attempt fails. The meth molecule, once bonded with the AMX 9 carrier, becomes chemically stable at room temperature for decades. It cannot be filtered by conventional means. Gas masks fail within hours, their seals corroded by microparticle accumulation. Air purification plants implode under the sheer volume of saturation. Attempts to create vacuum domes only work for the ultra-rich, who vanish into luxury fortresses, leaving the rest of the world to convulse in chaos. By day 7, the Earth has become a stage of erratic motion. No one sleeps, no one dreams. The skies are empty, the streets packed with people moving without purpose, twitching, ranting, hallucinating. Economies vanish. Supply chains break, but no one cares about food anymore. Hunger is eclipsed by the chemical firestorm burning in every bloodstream. And yet, in the midst of this spiral, there is still breath, still air, still time. You are still alive. For now. But what happens after the first week, when the high refuses to end, and the damage to the human brain becomes irreversible? The sun rises over the Atlantic like it always does, but the world it illuminates is no longer the same. In New York City, Wall Street opens with a strange and frenzied energy. Brokers bounce on their heels, speaking in bursts, snapping pens, tapping their phones 100 times a minute. They are smiling too widely, eyes darting, pupils huge. The opening bell rings and chaos erupts. Not the usual flurry of capitalism, but something sharper, more unhinged. By 10 a.m., multiple employees are barefoot, screaming about numbers that don't exist. One executive jumps from a balcony, not from despair, but from conviction that he can fly. The trading floor becomes a circus of hallucinations and shouting. Outside, traffic jams transform into dance parades as drivers abandon their vehicles to sing, sprint, or fight complete strangers with erratic joy. Across the world in Paris, commuters ride the metro in silence until one woman begins laughing, then another, then a dozen more. The laughter grows like a virus, loud and hysterical, as passengers convulse in delight, pounding the seats, hugging strangers, some of them crying with joy. Minutes later, the laughter turns into violence. One man claws at the windows, screaming about invisible snakes. Another rips off his clothes, convinced he is being microwaved. The train is halted. Police arrive, but they are no better. One officer unloads his entire clip into a wall, declaring it was breathing. Chaos does not spread. It blooms everywhere. In Seoul, a newscaster mid-broadcast stares into the camera, freezes, then bursts into maniacal laughter. She begins speaking backward, rearranging words into riddles, then declares that God is in her earpiece and demands the audience stop blinking. The station cuts the feed, but the video has already gone viral. Millions watch it on loop, sharing it like a meme, too euphoric or delirious to process its meaning. People flood the streets, not in protest or panic, but celebration. A mass, aimless party erupts as every sense is overloaded. Music blares from windows. People dance on cars. And yet, under the surface of the euphoria, something dark is taking root. The high is unlike anything ever recorded in pharmacology. Most meth users ingest or smoke small doses and experience a surge of energy, focus, and euphoria that lasts several hours. But this is atmospheric. It is constant. It flows directly into the lungs every few seconds, maintaining a consistent neurochemical barrage. Dopamine levels shoot to unnatural highs. Every synapse is electric. Time dilates. Emotions fragment. Reality begins to warp. This is not a trip. This is a total override of the human operating system. In Snow Paulo, people begin running without stopping. Down avenues, through alleys, barefoot and frantic, like animals in an invisible race. Entire families vanish from homes, found later collapsed from exhaustion in public parks, eyes wide open, mouths frothing. Teenagers live stream their experiences, laughing uncontrollably as they destroy furniture or vandalize their neighborhoods. One girl gains over 4 million followers in 2 hours by posting a video of herself chewing her own fingernails down to the bone. Comments flood in. "You're a goddess. Keep going. I can't stop watching." But no one realizes she is crying as she records the next one. In Lagos, the airport becomes a madhouse. People storm the gates, pushing past security, boarding planes with no destinations. Flights take off without clearance. Pilots, also affected, deviate from routes, flying lower than usual, making erratic turns, declaring they are being followed by floating cities or cloud beasts. One plane crashes into a mountain, killing all on board. no one notices. News feeds are jammed with too much madness to track any one story. Death is no longer news. Death is background noise. By nightfall, the emotional arc of the world begins to fracture. The initial wave of euphoria begins to twist. The chemical surge, once exhilarating, begins to backfire. Brains overloaded with dopamine begin to short-circuit. People start crying without reason. Others fall into paranoid spirals. Conspiracy theories flourish. A popular belief emerges in Australia that the moon is behind the meth invasion. In Canada, people burn all electronic devices, convinced that the chemical effect is being powered by Wi-Fi. They breathe the air and feel their thoughts unravel, so they turn to patterns, rituals, anything to feel control. But the most disturbing change is in the eyes. Everywhere you go, people's gazes are hollow and hungry, like they are watching a different world than you. They blink less. They flinch at shadows. They respond too fast or too slow. At gas stations, strangers begin fighting over nothing. At grocery stores, lines turn into stampedes. One man in Bangkok rips open a bag of flour and rolls in it, crying that he needs to be snow again. In suburban America, a father locks his family in the basement and begins drawing murals on the walls in their blood, declaring he is building a new language for the sky. Medical systems try to respond. Emergency rooms overflow within hours, but hospitals are not safe. Patients attack doctors. Doctors attack patients. Supplies are hoarded. Ambulances vanish. Pharmacies are raided. Tranquilizers are consumed like candy, but they do nothing. The meth is too dominant, too potent. It overrides all other drugs, even antipsychotics. People begin tying bedsheets around their faces, desperate to filter the air. It fails. The drug is smaller than their defenses. It invades relentlessly. You cannot choose sobriety. The air is your dealer now. Religious groups rise up. Some claim this is the rapture. Others say it is alien terraforming. Still more claim it is divine punishment for a world addicted to its own distractions. Cults form in record time. One group in San Francisco builds a tower made of televisions, chanting into megaphones for the sky god to end the trial. In Tokyo, a collective of engineers seals themselves into an underground data center, convinced they can upload their minds before their brains melt. None succeed. At the end of the first 24 hours, the world map is red with anomalies. Traffic systems collapse. Satellite networks falter. Cities are full of light, but empty of coherence. People walk in loops, some talking to animals, others stabbing lampposts or arguing with parked cars. Pets begin attacking owners. Birds swarm buildings. The entire biosphere trembles with stress, reacting to the subtle but pervasive madness infecting its dominant species. You look outside, and the streets are filled with motion, not purpose, not survival, just motion. And yet, there is no silence. The world hums. You feel it in your chest. There is no crash, no withdrawal, only a plateau of chemically enforced insanity. And this is only day one. But the real terror begins inside the mind, as your brain begins to buckle under the weight of continuous stimulation. In the next chapter, we go deep into the neurology of constant meth exposure and why you will never be the same again. The brain is a masterpiece of balance. Every thought you have, every memory, every decision is the result of millions of tiny electrochemical reactions working together in harmony. Dopamine, the pleasure molecule, has always been one of its most delicate instruments. It spikes when you experience joy, when you accomplish something, or when you connect with others, but it also returns to baseline. That dip back to normal is what keeps you stable, grounded, human. Now imagine that balance destroyed, not gradually, but violently. Every breath you take floods your body with an artificial dopamine surge. Every second, your pleasure system is being attacked, overstimulated, hijacked by a compound it never evolved to handle. Inside your skull, your brain begins to drown. You do not feel calm or relaxed. You feel invincible, twitchy, focused to the point of obsession. At first, it is exhilarating. You see patterns in the ceiling tiles. You hear the rhythm of electrical wires. Your mind races through 10 thoughts at once, unable to land. Then the confusion creeps in. You forget why you walked into a room. You repeat the same sentence 4 times without noticing. You stare at your own reflection and no longer trust what you see. Methamphetamine, even in small doses, acts like a biological sledgehammer. It invades your central nervous system and forces the release of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin far beyond natural levels. In ordinary recreational use, a single hit of meth can release 12 times more dopamine than a sexual orgasm. In this new world, where meth is inhaled every second, your brain is flooded with these signals continuously. It is not designed for that. Receptors burn out, circuits misfire, neurological pathways become eroded by overuse. You are not high, you are chemically reprogrammed. As the hours pass, your perception of time becomes distorted. 10 minutes feel like an hour. Your memories begin to fragment. You recall childhood events that never happened. You forget your sister's name. You hear your own thoughts echo like radio static. This is not just psychosis. This is a full-blown breakdown of executive function. Your prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for judgment, impulse, control, and reason, begins to flicker like a dying light bulb. Researchers in this world scramble to model the neurodegeneration. Brain scans show the beginnings of literal holes forming in the gray matter. Blood vessels swell, neurons overstimulate until they die, one after another. In sleep labs, now manned by twitching scientists, half mad themselves, EEG readings show that subjects no longer generate REM sleep patterns. Their brains are awake even when their bodies collapse. Microsizers begin to register across the globe. People stop making sense. They speak in riddles or nothing at all. In rural villages, elders forget how to speak. In urban towers, executives recite childhood songs in meetings. Students try to attend class but forget how to read. Teachers write on walls with their fingernails, convinced chalk is lying. The entire education system unravels, not because of violence, but because no one can hold a thought for longer than a minute. This is not cultural collapse. This is cognitive extinction. You begin to feel it yourself. Your thoughts scatter. You try to focus, but your mind skips like a scratched record. You write notes to yourself on your skin, reminders of basic routines: eat, drink, breathe, but then forget why you wrote them. Paranoia sets in. You start to believe the air is watching you. You avoid windows. You unplug your electronics. You cover vents with towels, but it changes nothing. The drug is inside you, inside your lungs, your bloodstream, your brain. Then comes the auditory hallucinations. Soft whispers at first. You think someone is behind you. Then the whispers turn into shouting. Your name, over and over. You scream at your walls. You cry and do not know why. You laugh and cannot stop. The lines between internal and external reality dissolve. This is not a breakdown. This is the new baseline. In neuroscience terms, what is happening is called monoamine depletion. Your brain, flooded with artificial surges of pleasure chemicals, stops producing its own. The result is a paradox. The more you feel stimulated, the more emotionally dead you become. Happiness becomes meaningless. Empathy disappears. The regions responsible for moral judgment and social bonding begin to shut down. You no longer care what happens to others. You no longer feel shame, guilt, or remorse. You are no longer human in the ways that matter. In neighborhoods across the globe, friends betray each other without hesitation. One man sells his mother's oxygen tank for a glowing shoelace he believes holds secret messages. Another poisons a rival's food, convinced he is a lizard. Parents abandon children. Lovers turn violent. Domestic spaces become war zones. And in the middle of it all, people smile. The meth makes sure of it. That grin on your face is not joy. It is a mask carved by the drug and burned into your muscle memory. The eyes become the window into this new condition. Enlarged pupils, constant scanning, twitching eyelids, dark rings. People develop what is referred to as the meth stare, a distant, disconnected gaze, as if the soul itself has retreated to survive, and yet the brain keeps functioning in its damaged state. Language persists, but it becomes fragmented. Communication becomes a game of symbols and distortions. New dialects form based on sound repetition, hand signals, body tics. The longer the exposure continues, the worse it gets. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to heal and rewire, becomes corrupted. Brains no longer recover, they adapt permanently. The wiring reconfigures around the drug. Children born into this environment display abnormal brain structures from infancy. Their frontal lobes develop asymmetrically. Their limbic systems are hyperactive. Their capacity for empathy is reduced. They do not smile at their parents. They do not cry when hurt. They laugh when others bleed. For the rest of us, madness becomes routine. Days blur together. You forget the date. You forget your name. You begin to remember dreams that are not yours. You feel watched by objects. You talk to shadows and are surprised when they answer. You no longer know what is real. The line between hallucination and memory is gone. In the remaining universities, now turned into bunkers of desperate science, neurobiologists try to find solutions. Some work on counter-nanoparticles, others explore deep sedation via induced comas, but nothing works long-term. The brain, once altered by atmospheric meth, no longer responds to old rules. Sleep-inducing drugs backfire, triggering seizures or death. Oxygen tanks filled with purified air offer relief for a few minutes, then cause panic attacks as the body rebels against its chemical starvation. Even attempts at lobotomies fail as the brain adapts and fights back. In one chilling case, a survivor cuts out a part of his frontal lobe to escape the visions. He succeeds in silencing the voices, but he forgets how to walk, how to swallow, how to recognize his wife. He smiles, though he never stops smiling. By the end of the first month, humanity is not dead, but transformed. The species has become a living network of overstimulated minds locked in a feedback loop of chaos. Cities buzz with incoherent energy. Bodies move, but do not rest. Eyes blink, but do not see. The world becomes a haunted maze of twitching flesh and fragmented thoughts, and all of it began with one shift in the air. But mental collapse is only one part of the story. What happens when society as a whole begins to mirror this broken mind? In the next section, we explore how governments, institutions, and entire cities implode under the pressure of constant chemical madness. You wake up, if you can still call it waking, on the floor of what used to be a metro station. Your limbs twitch, your jaw aches from grinding all night. You are surrounded by dozens of others in the same condition, eyes open, unblinking, scratching at walls, muttering in loops. No one questions why they're here. There is no destination, only motion, only noise. This is now a city in constant motion, a chaotic ballet of chemically altered bodies, pacing, twitching, building nothing, breaking everything. Civilization, once a structure of laws, rituals, commerce, and community, is now a theater of incoherence. Society has not evolved, it has cracked. It started with traffic systems, with overstimulated populations and hallucinating drivers. Roads became death traps within the first 48 hours. Automated vehicles failed when passengers began overriding controls, convinced the AI was plotting against them. Highways turned into parking lots filled with abandoned vehicles, their horns blaring endlessly as engines overheated. Soon, public transport systems collapsed altogether. Conductors walked off mid-route. Pilots refused to land. Train cars derailed as operators became convinced the tracks were being rearranged by ghosts. Commerce was next. With executive function shredded and attention spans disintegrating, business meetings became unintelligible screaming matches. CEOs locked themselves in boardrooms, drawing diagrams of eyes and claiming to see the code in the walls. Bankers sold their buildings for fruit. People forgot what money was even for. Retail stores were looted, not for survival, but in chaotic reverie. One woman in Chicago filled a shopping cart with nothing but chewing gum, peeled the wrappers off each piece, and used them to spell out warnings on the street. It's in the wind. No one stopped her. No one understood. Civic order disintegrated faster than any pandemic or war in history. Courthouses became dens of shouting. Judges handed out rulings in gibberish. One declared a man guilty of breathing with intent. Another ordered a defendant to sing the truth or be eaten. The legal system, unable to process the chemically compromised minds flooding its doors, simply broke. Prisons overflowed with inmates who could no longer remember why they were arrested. Guards vanished. Riot squads deployed and then began turning on each other in the streets. One recorded video shows a SWAT team standing in a circle, arguing over which of them is a hologram. Emergency services followed suit. Police officers, their minds ravaged like everyone else's, became erratic, violent, and paranoid. Traffic stops turned into shootouts. Arrests devolved into public beatings. Some officers abandoned their posts, convinced they were part of a simulation. Others banded together into roaming factions, operating with no oversight, enforcing rules no one understands. In some cities, these groups become new forms of government, twitching warlords with meth-induced vision quests, ruling over neighborhoods like ancient kings. Government institutions tried to broadcast order. World leaders gave speeches, but their messages quickly became unhinged. In the United States, The president attempted a national address on day 5, slurring words and scratching his arms until they bled. He insisted he was transmitting to the center of the earth. The feed was cut. The public, seeing the visible collapse of power, stopped obeying any semblance of regulation. Laws became irrelevant. Borders dissolved. Nations, once grounded in policy and enforcement, became lines on old maps no one remembered how to read. Schools shuttered almost immediately. Teachers, unable to keep students focused for more than a few seconds, either fled or broke down. Classrooms became strange, haunted places, desks overturned, walls covered in incoherent scribbles. Children began imitating their chemically fractured parents. They barked instead of speaking. They drew elaborate, meaningless diagrams. They forgot how to write letters, but learned to communicate in stuttered codes. In one region, children formed their own classrooms, ruled by the oldest kid with the loudest voice, teaching each other songs that made no sense. One child repeated the same phrase for 6 hours straight. The stars are trying to leave. Religion did not offer solace. Places of worship became magnets for chaos. Priests lost their sermons. Congregants began chanting nonsense. New cults emerged from the ruins of faith. In Rome, a group took over the Vatican and began writing scriptures in blood on the walls, declaring that the air god had returned. In Saudi Arabia, pilgrims began crawling instead of walking, carving spirals into the ground. Spiritual leaders split into 2 camps: those who believed this was divine punishment and those who insisted it was ascension. Neither group could agree on what to do. In the ruins of media, information became lethal. News stations either fell silent or became centers of disinformation. As Meth-list broadcasters delivered cryptic monologues laced with paranoia and personal delusion. One anchor in London insisted the weather was being controlled by laughter. Another in Johannesburg began reciting the digits of pi as a sermon. Viewers, equally impaired, began forming their beliefs based on who felt right. Rational thought was gone. People trusted hallucinations, trusted feelings, trusted nothing. Cities began to cannibalize themselves. In New Delhi, food shortages triggered riots, but not for hunger. Crowds destroyed supply trucks for the thrill of destruction. In Los Angeles, apartment complexes burned from kitchen fires started by people who forgot they had stoves. In Moscow, whole blocks went dark as infrastructure collapsed, but the residents did not complain. They painted their windows black, claiming the stars were staring too loudly, with no institutional structure left to hold society together. New hierarchies emerged: tribes, mobs, twitching collectives bonded by shared hallucination and paranoia. Some were peaceful, forming drum circles or ritual dances to clean the air. Others became violently territorial, marking their zones with chalk symbols, attacking anyone who entered. These groups created new rules, none of which made sense. One group demanded everyone walk backward. Another insisted all food be buried before eating. To disobey meant death or exile into the empty streets. The economy collapsed completely, with no functional markets, no banking systems, no supply chain. People reverted to strange bartering systems. In Argentina, bananas were worth more than gold. In Norway, people traded fingernail clippings for clean socks. Cryptocurrency collapsed when miners forgot their passwords, or worse, believed the coins had become sentient. The concept of value itself eroded. People began hoarding random items, bottle caps, forks, bricks, claiming they could hear them whisper instructions. Even time fractured, with no sleep cycles, no daily routines, and no reliable communication. Humans lost track of day and night. Some cities declared time was dead. Others created new clocks, based on movement, based on sound, based on breath. None of them worked. The sun rose and set, but no one looked up anymore. The sky became something to fear. And yet there was still energy, still motion, still the illusion of life. Cities pulsed with erratic motion, flashing lights, flailing bodies, wild-eyed screams. From a distance, Earth looked alive, buzzing, frantic. But up close, it was a portrait of neurological collapse in slow motion. You are now a citizen of a broken world. You no longer have a job. You no longer pay taxes. You no longer sleep. You exist in the middle of a nightmare that looks like a festival. Lights, sounds, music, motion, but no meaning, no progress, just the endless hum of chemically induced momentum. A planet of 8 billion souls, wired beyond comprehension, drifting into oblivion with smiles on their faces and fire in their lungs. But without sleep, without rest, the body begins to decay. What happens to a species when every member is forced to stay awake forever? In the next section, we explore the horrifying consequences of a world that can no longer dream. You have not slept in 6 days. You cannot remember the last dream you had. You are lying on a cold tile floor in what used to be a hotel lobby, your body shaking from exhaustion, your eyes bloodshot and wide open. You tell yourself to sleep. You whisper it like a prayer, but sleep does not come. It does not even approach. Your brain hums with electrical static, flooded with synthetic dopamine and adrenaline. You are trapped inside a body that wants to collapse, but a mind that will not shut down. You are not alone. All around you, people mutter and twitch and stare at ceilings, unblinking. They do not ask for sleep anymore. They know it is gone. The meth-laced air has done more than hijacked your thoughts. It has severed your connection to rest. Sleep is no longer a biological need. It is a lost function, disabled by perpetual chemical overstimulation. The circadian rhythm, once anchored to sunlight and melatonin, has been overridden by a constant storm of neurotransmitters that tell your body to remain alert. Night and day have blended into an eternal waking state. You are conscious every second, and it is agony. The effects of this global insomnia are catastrophic. Within the first 3 days of continuous wakefulness, the average person begins to experience microdreams, brief flashes of visual hallucinations and auditory distortions that leak into waking life. You think you see someone standing in the corner of your vision. You hear your name whispered in a crowd of silence. But these are not dreams. These are your brain trying to purge its buildup of memory and emotion, like a boiling pot with no release valve. After 4 days, motor control begins to degrade. People stumble when they walk, their legs forgetting how to obey. Speech becomes slurred. Sentences become riddled with tangents and repetitions. Some people begin repeating the same word for hours at a time, convinced it is a key to unlocking their thoughts. One man in Istanbul was found walking in circles around a fountain for 3 days, chanting orange without pause. When asked what it meant, he blinked, confused, and said, "It keeps the spiders away." By day 6, the human body begins to break down. Organs swell, immune systems fail, muscle tissue starts to degrade due to lack of cellular repair. Eyelids twitch uncontrollably, skin peels, gums bleed. People begin scratching themselves, digging into their own flesh, not from psychosis alone, but from the body's desperate attempt to feel something real. Hospitals, already overrun and dysfunctional, become morgues of the wide-awake dead people who died with their eyes open, hearts still racing, mouths frozen mid-sentence. Scientists holed up in their last surviving labs observe that sleep deprivation is no longer just a side effect of the drug. It is now the primary mechanism of destruction. The brain's need for REM sleep, for memory consolidation, emotional regulation, cellular detoxification, is absolute. Without it, neural pathways collapse like overloaded circuits. Synapses misfire. Long-term memory disintegrates. Personality fragments. People forget who they are. They remember only the present moment, and even that fades after a few minutes. There are no dreams anymore. There are only simulations, visual noise that flickers across the mind in fractured, meaningless bursts. The population begins to resemble a planet of insomniac automatons, always moving, always reacting, but never resting. It becomes impossible to plan, impossible to learn. Even basic conversations devolve into nonsense. The world becomes filled with people speaking to themselves in whispers, repeating phrases they do not understand. The economic effects of global insomnia are devastating. Workforces become erratic. Productivity spikes for a few days, then crashes completely. People begin working endlessly on tasks that no longer matter, painting the same wall over and over, writing letters to the president of Saturn, organizing sand grains by color. Manufacturing collapses. Machines are damaged by overworked technicians who hallucinate new instruction manuals. Currency becomes irrelevant when no one can count or remember the value of anything. Governments issue emergency bulletins urging people to find shelter and rest. But there is nowhere to rest. The air follows you inside, underground, underwater, sealed buildings, filtered domes, even oxygen tanks. None offer true protection. The meth particles are too fine, too persistent. They bond with moisture. They cling to your skin. You can scrub yourself raw and still breathe it in. Sleep becomes a myth, a bedtime story you tell your children as they stare at you with dry, unblinking eyes. Across the world, the desperate search for solutions spawns bizarre rituals. In Tokyo, people dig trenches and lie in them, convinced the Earth's magnetic pole will reboot their minds. In Munich, entire families soak in ice baths, hoping the cold will shock their bodies into shutdown. In Cape Town, a group builds a massive tower of speakers to blast white noise at maximum volume, believing that frequency alignment will restore sleep. None of it works. The noise only feeds the madness. Religious awakenings turn apocalyptic. Cults evolve rapidly around the concept of the eternal witness, the belief that sleep was a form of weakness, and now humanity has ascended. Their leaders do not blink. They do not sit. They speak in riddles and shiver as they deliver sermons about the new awakening, in which the human mind must be stripped of illusion and kept forever conscious. They call sleep a sin, a betrayal of the air's gift. Their followers mutilate themselves to stay awake, cutting their arms with glass to shock the brain into clarity. Sleep clinics, now relics of a bygone era, become fortresses of the desperate. People line up outside, begging for sedation. But inside, doctors have already collapsed. The sedation drugs, pumped into bodies still breathing mether, backfire. Instead of inducing sleep, They cause cardiac arrest or full-body paralysis. Comas do not hold. Patients wake up screaming within minutes. Dreams are no longer possible. The chemical hurricane of meth overrides every attempt at peace. By the second week of insomnia, the human population begins to exhibit signs of acute neurodegenerative acceleration. Alzheimer-like symptoms manifest in children. Adults forget language. They lose object permanence. They forget how to eat, how to dress, how to open doors. Some stand in corners for hours, unable to remember why they moved. Others wander into forests, convinced the trees can teach them to sleep. Many never return. Society, unable to function without rest, turns inward. Buildings crumble. Infrastructure rots. But the lights stay on, flickering, buzzing, watched by a population that no longer blinks. It is as if Earth itself has become a casino that no one can leave. Flashing lights, constant sound, no clocks, no exit. The world is open 24 hours a day, but no one remembers what a day is. And you, still breathing, still twitching, you are losing track of reality. You forget where you are. You forget who you were. The lines on your hands look unfamiliar. You try to speak, but the words don't form. You laugh, but it sounds wrong. You remember things that never happened. You see people who are not there. You feel your mind shrinking, narrowing, collapsing into a single point of panic. But you cannot scream. You are too tired to scream. And yet, you are not tired enough to sleep. But if you thought the sleepless were dangerous, wait until you see the ones who embrace it. In the next section, we explore the rise of meth-adapted cults and hyper-violent tribes, the new rulers of the wasteland. You hear the drums long before you see the flames. A slow, frenzied rhythm pounds through the air, irregular and chaotic, like the heartbeat of some monster buried beneath the ground. Then come the screams, not from pain, but from something worse, ecstasy, howling, joy, feral and guttural, as if the people making the sound are no longer entirely human. You hide behind the rusted frame of a collapsed overpass, your skin caked in soot, your heart thundering in sync with the drums. Around you, a dozen others crouch in silence, watching from the shadows as a convoy of meth-adapted cultists marches past. Their eyes shine like mirrors, their faces painted in blood and ash. They are armed not with guns, but with blades made of rebar and broken glass. This is no longer a city. This is territory, and you are in the wrong one. By the third week of global meth exposure, society has fractured into isolated pockets of survivors, none of them sane. The overwhelming majority of the population has lost the ability to reason, organize, or even remember who they once were. In that void of identity and order, new structures emerge: tribes, warbands, cults, born not from ideology, but from shared hallucination, shared paranoia, and the hunger for control in a world without rules. These groups are not accidents of circumstance. They are the new dominant forces on Earth. In what was once Kansas City, a cult known as the Teeth of Light has taken over the downtown ruins. They wear headgear fashioned from shattered TVs and wrap their arms in barbed wire. Their leader, a man named Prophet Clutch, claims to have spoken to the air itself and declared that the old world died because it slept too much. Sleep, he says, is death. Movement is salvation. His followers dance constantly, even while speaking, even while fighting. They believe that stopping is a form of betrayal. Anyone caught resting is dragged into the pulse room, where they are forced to listen to looped recordings of laughter until their minds snap. Further north, their symbol is a swirling coil of blue paint marked onto every wall, vehicle, and forehead. They believe the air is a message and that every breath carries a new word from a higher being. Members of the Spiral Union speak in tongues, record the patterns of their coughs, and execute anyone who breathes incorrectly. Their scouts wear vests made of window blinds and move in groups of 7, claiming each step must mirror the rhythm of a universal heartbeat. Outsiders are blinded before interrogation to prevent the spread of visual lies. In the deserts of the American Southwest, tribes with no names ride motorcycles adorned with bones and Christmas lights. They attack settlements not for resources, but for chaos. They burn entire towns to the ground and laugh in the flames. These are not bandits. They are exhibitions of madness in motion. One tribe, nicknamed the Ash Children, collects fingers as trophies. Another paints their faces white and reenacts fictional battles from comic books and cartoons, believing them to be lost historical texts. The boundaries between fantasy and reality are gone. These tribes live entirely within the stories their fractured minds have invented. In South America, old cartel infrastructure is reborn into something even more deranged. Former drug lords become warlords of breathing. One such figure, known only as El Respirador, wears an iron lung as armor and demands tribute in the form of screams. He claims to control the purity of the air in his territory and has hundreds of followers willing to kill for his favor. His compounds operate like ancient temples, complete with human sacrifices, ritual inhalations, and chants performed at sunrise to honor the chemical gods. These cults do not merely survive, they thrive. Their bodies, having adapted to the endless meth intake, are gaunt, wiry, and hyperactive. They sleep in shifts of microseconds, collapsing and rebooting in bursts. Their brains no longer process time like the rest of us. Some experience entire lifetimes in a single afternoon. Others forget who they were each morning, reshaping identity like clay. Their rituals bind them, their myths sustain them. One group in Scandinavia worships a vending machine they believe dispenses eternal truth. Another in rural China believes that breathing in unison allows them to summon storms. Not all tribes are overtly violent. Some form communes built on silence and strict order, wearing identical uniforms and enforcing behavior through coded gestures. But even these groups are dangerous. Their peace is not rooted in sanity, but in shared delusion. They are one hallucination away from collapse, and many already treat outsiders as contaminants that must be removed. These enclaves function like living psychoses, sustained by routine and terror. To navigate this new world, survivors must understand the rituals of each cult. A wrong color, a wrong word, a wrong movement can trigger immediate execution. Some groups demand a song before entry. Others insist on eye contact or absolute avoidance. Negotiation is nearly impossible, as logic no longer applies. You may think you are offering food, but they believe you are delivering poison. You may bring water, but they think it carries dreams. Everything is a symbol. Everything is dangerous. Children born into these tribes grow up without a memory of the old world. They are taught to fear silence, to distrust stillness, to revere madness as wisdom. Some are marked from birth, their names replaced by sounds or colors. A child may be called yellow or click or third breath. These young ones learn to fight before they learn to read. They navigate cities like mazes, understanding which colors mean war and which buildings are haunted. They do not cry. They do not rest. They inherit a world where breathing is identity. Language mutates. Dialects fracture. Words are shortened, repeated, screamed, whispered. Some cults have entire vocabularies made of gestures and cough patterns. Others chant in loops for hours. Communication is no longer about meaning. It is about rhythm, trust, and madness. And within each cult, a central truth remains. They are alive not because they resisted the drug, but because they surrendered to it. They embraced the high. They restructured their minds to survive in a world that never blinks. You, the outsider, are a threat to their ecosystem. You remember the old world. You try to sleep. You ask questions that makes you unpredictable, dangerous. If you are captured, you will be given one chance to join, to forget, to convert. If you fail, they will unmake you, not with bullets, but with noise, with flashing lights, with symbols you cannot understand, until your mind snaps and you no longer resist, until you begin to smile. And across the landscape, their numbers grow. Every collapsed building becomes a temple. Every campfire, a ceremony. Every scream, a song. The tribes do not seek peace, they seek permanence. In their eyes, the chaos is not a curse, it is evolution, and they are the first true humans of this new age. But as the world's social fabric dissolves, the very biosphere begins to mutate. What happens when animals, plants, and ecosystems absorb the same drug? In the next chapter, we witness how nature itself begins to turn against us. You are hiding in a thicket, surrounded by trees that should offer sanctuary, but something feels wrong. The forest no longer sounds like it used to. The birds are not singing, they are shrieking, their calls sharp and erratic, like alarms sounding off at random. Above you, squirrels dash from branch to branch with impossible speed, leaping recklessly across gaps, their eyes wild, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. You catch sight of a fox, fur patchy and thin, chasing its own tail in a tight circle, frothing at the mouth. Then it stops and stares directly at you, head tilting with a twitch, as if trying to decide whether to flee or attack. You hold your breath. It charges. This is not the forest you remember. This is a biome unraveling. When meth bonded to the global atmosphere, the human cost was immediate and visible. But what went unnoticed in those early days was its infiltration into the rest of Earth's living systems. The atmosphere is not a closed loop around humanity. It is the shared breath of all life. Every creature that draws oxygen is exposed. Birds, mammals, reptiles, insects, even fish, all slowly inhaling minute, persistent doses of the same stimulant. And nature does not respond with grace. It responds with chaos. Bird migration collapses. Pigeons lose their sense of direction and begin crashing into buildings en masse. Flocks of crows form impossible formations in the sky, circling for hours, then dive-bombing random targets. Some fly until they drop dead mid-air. Insects mutate at an alarming rate. Locusts swarm in unnatural numbers, attacking not just crops, but livestock and people. Bees abandon their hives, stinging with reckless aggression, unable to coordinate. Ants form violent clusters and begin cannibalizing their own colonies. In the oceans, the problem is even more severe. Meth molecules bound to moisture enter the hydrological cycle, raining down into rivers, lakes, and seas. Fish begin displaying strange behavior, erratic swimming, surface breaching, and in some species, active pursuit of light sources or human movement. Coral reefs, already fragile, bleach at accelerated rates as marine ecosystems spiral into imbalance. Jellyfish blooms surge in coastal waters, clogging filtration systems and swarming harbors. Even sharks become more aggressive, less predictable, as their prey patterns dissolve. Plants, though not neurological organisms, are not immune. Through their stomata, tiny pores used for gas exchange, they absorb trace amounts of the altered atmosphere. The result is bizarre growth anomalies. Vines grow twisted and tangled, reacting to movement like carnivorous species. Trees begin shedding leaves out of sync with seasons, some sprouting sap that fluoresces under moonlight. Fields of corn develop stunted, erratic stalks that lean toward passing vehicles. The natural cycles of photosynthesis and respiration become disrupted, triggering an imbalance in oxygen-carbon dioxide exchange ratios. Forests no longer filter the air. They compete with it. Farms collapse within weeks. Livestock refuse to eat or sleep. Cows stumble through pastures, mooing endlessly, eyes glazed. Chickens trample each other in frenzied waves, laying eggs without shells or eating their own feathers. Farmers try to sedate them, but the meth in the air overwhelms every effort. Slaughterhouses are abandoned as workers either flee or join local cults. The global food supply chain disintegrates. Crops rot in the fields, not because of drought or disease, but because the very biology of Earth has entered a chemical nightmare. Domesticated animals undergo a dark transformation. Dogs, once loyal, become unpredictable. Some grow clingy, others turn violent. They bark at invisible threats, gnaw on metal, tear through walls. Cats vanish for days and return with wild eyes and blood on their fur. Zoos become death zones. Elephants scream for hours, smashing enclosures. Gorillas beat their chests until bones break. Parrots repeat nonsensical phrases in rapid bursts, speaking as if possessed by fractured minds. Zookeepers flee, and the gates are left open. Wild and captive animals spill into cities, further destabilizing already collapsing societies. Veterinarians report phenomena that were once confined to obscure case studies. Serotonin syndrome in pigs, erratic self-harm in monkeys, and even induced seizures in parrots. But they cannot keep up. Animal shelters shut down. Wildlife reserves fall silent. Every species begins to exhibit traits once considered exclusively human: restlessness, aggression, hallucination, and collapse. Some try to blame it on infection or some new environmental virus. But the truth is undeniable. Every living thing that breathes is affected. The meth is omnipresent. It does not choose its host. Mutations begin to appear. Amphibians born in the polluted wetlands of Southeast Asia develop bioluminescent patches that flash in sync with seismic activity. Insects show erratic limb growth, with centipedes growing twice their normal length and millipedes curling into balls that pulse and hiss. A species of frog in the Amazon is observed croaking in what resembles rhythmic patterns. Some researchers believe it is mimicking the drumming of local cults. Birds in North America begin building nests from plastic, bones, and torn pages of books, aligning them in symmetrical patterns. Scientists no longer call these anomalies, they call them adaptations. But adaptation does not mean survival. It means distortion. It means ecosystems begin consuming themselves. In Yellowstone, wolves kill each other in territory disputes that spiral into extinction events. In Australia, feral cats wipe out entire populations of native birds in drug-fueled killing frenzies. Predators grow too erratic to hunt. Prey species stop hiding. The predator-prey relationship unravels. Entire food webs collapse. What remains are scavengers, mice, rats, vultures multiplying in places where humans used to thrive. The skies change. Weather patterns, once governed by delicate ecological cues, shift into unpredictability. Bees no longer pollinate in time with blooming flowers. Forest canopies fail to regulate moisture levels. Atmospheric conditions turn volatile. Thunderstorms appear out of nowhere and vanish just as fast. Fog lingers where it should not. Wind behaves like a presence, gusting in cycles that seem deliberate. Some say the planet is waking up. Others say it is dying in its sleep. Meth contamination begins to alter water sources. Rivers carry chemical runoff that glows faintly under starlight. Lakes foam at their edges. Rainwater turns sticky in certain regions, with residue that irritates skin and burns crops. Aquifers once tapped for drinking become storage tanks for hallucination. Those who still drink surface water begin seeing things. Animals with human faces, clouds that whisper their names, reflections that do not match their movements. And through all of this, the plants remain silent witnesses. They grow but do not thrive. They blossom but do not seed. The biosphere becomes a gallery of broken life, each species warped by the one common denominator they can never escape: the air. There are attempts to engineer countermeasures. Scientists develop genetically modified plants that supposedly absorb meth particles, acting as living filters. But within days, the plants begin sprouting erratically, changing color, and producing fruit that induces seizures. Some believe the plants have developed intelligence, others that they are merely responding to a poisoned world. Whatever the case, they are no longer tools, they are symptoms. You step over a patch of grass, and it crunches, not from frost, but from dryness. The grass is brittle, yellowed, crackling like broken glass. In the distance, a once lush hill has turned gray, its trees leaning as if to whisper secrets to each other. You know now that there is no safe zone in nature. The earth is not fighting the meth, it is absorbing it. Even extinction is no longer natural. Animals do not simply vanish, they implode. A deer is found in a suburban street, eyes wide, heart exploded from a meth-induced panic attack. A flock of geese lands in a pond and dies on impact, having forgotten how to brake. A horse collapses in a field, foaming and convulsing, only to rise minutes later and charge into a wall. These are not deaths of hunger or exposure. These are deaths of the mind. And the worst part is that nature keeps going. It keeps moving. It keeps adapting. Evolution has been hijacked by a stimulant with no off switch. The future of life on Earth is no longer shaped by natural selection. It is shaped by chemical distortion, a slow, deliberate spiral into madness, encoded now into every breath, every raindrop, every cell. But what happens to the next generation, those conceived and born in this broken world? In the next section, we descend into the lives of the children of meth, mutated, disconnected, and utterly alien. You stumble into what was once a maternity ward, now stripped bare. The hospital windows are smashed. 4 bags hang limp. blood crusts on the tiles. But in one corner, swaddled in makeshift linen and cradled in the arms of a half-conscious woman, lies a newborn, silent, eyes wide open, not crying, not blinking. He stares at you with unnatural stillness, as if already aware of the world he's been born into. His skin is thin, almost translucent, revealing blue veins pulsing with energy. You step closer, and the baby twitches, once sharply, then resumes his quiet, alert gaze. You have the overwhelming sense that he is watching you, analyzing you, not as a child, but as something far older. You take a step back. This is not a normal infant. This is a product of the air. It began within the first month of the atmospheric transformation. Pregnancies that were already underway began to deviate from the expected timelines. Fetuses developed accelerated heart rates. Ultrasounds revealed abnormal limb movements, erratic eye fluttering, and heightened neural activity. Some doctors, before the collapse, reported seeing developing brains that appeared overstimulated, lit up constantly, as if the fetus were never resting, never sleeping. Many pregnancies failed outright. Miscarriages rose across all continents. Stillbirths became common. But the ones who survived were different. The children of Meth, as they came to be known in the fragmented remnants of scientific communities, represent a new kind of humanity, one gestated in a womb saturated with synthetic neurostimulants, bathed in molecules not meant for biological development. Their features are immediately unsettling, not monstrous, but subtly off, too quiet, too alert. They rarely cry. When they do, it's not from hunger or pain, but seemingly at random, in shrill, inhuman tones that stop adults in their tracks. Their muscles develop rapidly. Some crawl within days, others walk within weeks. But it's not just their physicality, it's their awareness. They do not respond to faces with recognition. They watch movements instead, your hands, your mouth, your eyes. They prefer flashing lights to human interaction. Attempts to swaddle or cuddle them often result in sudden, violent shuddering or piercing stares. Many reject breast milk, instead gnawing on objects, chewing plastics, paper, glass. They do not babble. They do not giggle. Some hum to themselves, low, constant drones, like the ambient hum of a broken television. Their brains, what little we still understand of them, are evolving under pressure. MRI scans performed before the total collapse of diagnostic labs showed massively overactive amygdalae, centers of emotion and survival, paired with underactive regions of empathy. These children do not bond. They do not flinch when others cry. They do not react to affection or fear. They seem designed for something else: reaction, calculation, processing. You might think of them as detached. But what if they are simply operating at a frequency you no longer understand? Education is impossible. Attempts to teach these children language result in mimicry, but not learning. They repeat phrases without context, often obsessively. Some latch onto numbers, others memorize sequences of lights. One child in Nigeria, at just 9 months old, began assembling plastic containers into perfect spirals, silently, for hours. Another in Poland was seen drawing concentric circles on walls using their own waste, not with distress, but methodical calm. Their behavior is patterned, ritualistic, yet devoid of recognizable purpose. Worse still is their lack of fear. Toddlers approach fire without hesitation. They crawl along ledges. They stare directly into headlights. Their pain thresholds are shockingly high. One child fractured, his arm falling from a rooftop, then continued walking on it. Another stood motionless in the snow until their skin turned blue, completely unbothered. Parents, if they still exist, no longer know how to protect them. In fact, many parents begin to fear them. These children do not form attachments. They do not call for mama or dada. In one horrifying case, a mother was found murdered, her 2-year-old sitting beside her, tracing symbols into her blood. When asked why, the child simply said she stopped moving. No remorse, no understanding, just observation. They are not evil. They are not possessed. They are simply adapted to a world where sleep, trust, and emotional regulation are extinct. As they age, the traits intensify. 10-year-olds run networks of scavengers, organizing other children into mobile units to hunt for batteries, mirrors, anything shiny. They operate without hierarchy or conflict. They do not argue. They do not play. They distribute resources with perfect neutrality, punish defectors with silence, and reject adult instruction. Attempts to discipline them are met with indifference. Attempts to love them are met with confusion. Some form echo groups, tight circles that move in perfect synchronization. They hum the same frequency. They blink at once. They finish each other's phrases. Psychologists in the early days believed they were forming collective identities. Later, it became clear that they were something else, distributed minds, like ant colonies, but human, or something close to human. They solve problems together. They defend each other without commands, and they respond to threats with cold, coordinated precision. There are rumors of entire settlements run by these children, silent, perfectly organized places where adults are not allowed. Travelers report seeing lines of children, shoulder to shoulder, staring outward from rooftops. No smiles, no gestures, just watching. When approached, they vanish into alleyways and buildings. Surveillance drones sent to monitor them either crash or return with corrupted data. Some believe the children are interfering with electronics. Others say the children simply know when they're being watched. Attempts to study them further have failed. The few researchers who remain either vanish or return altered. One team in Brazil went in to document a suspected meth-borne colony. Only one scientist came back. She could not speak. She carved spirals into her skin and refused to close her eyes. She died within a week, whispering, "They don't want sleep, they want silence." Not all children are part of these collectives. Some wander alone, disconnected, their minds too fragmented even for group behavior. These are the most tragic and the most dangerous. They howl in the night. They tear at their own faces. They mimic animals. They bite anyone who gets too close. Some are adopted by cults and raised as prophets. Others are chained, caged, feared as demons. But none are truly children in the traditional sense. They are products of a new world, born of air, madness, and exposure. The question scientists no longer ask is how to save them. That question died months ago. The question now is what they will become. Will they rebuild the world in their own fractured image? Will they remember language, architecture, history, or will they evolve into something else entirely, something no longer bound to our understanding of civilization? You encounter one of them while scavenging an old pharmacy. A girl, no older than 5, crouched behind the counter, assembling metal parts into a strange shape. She sees you. She doesn't flinch. She stares for a long time, then lifts her finger and points, not at you, but at the air beside you. You turn. There is nothing there. When you look back, she is gone. You will never forget her face, not because it was monstrous, but because it looked like a reflection of everything the world had become, hollow and awake. But while these children may be the future, a different kind of survival has emerged in the present one, engineered and paid for. In the next section, we enter the sealed zones of the elite, where air is still clean, but the price of breathing is unforgivable. You walk for days, lungs burning, eyes twitching, mind flickering like a dying signal. The world around you has descended into noise and frenzy, flesh, fire, and madness wrapped in motion. But one morning, beyond a ridge of dust-covered hills and cracked solar panels, you see something surreal. A wall, not a crumbling ruin or tribal barricade, but a perfectly smooth, monolithic barrier, tall and seamless, humming with faint electricity. On its surface, a logo gleams in mirrored chrome. Oases, the air you deserve. Beneath it, in smaller print, breathe differently. This is not a myth. This is real. A domed city, a sealed arcology, one of the last artificial havens where breathable, meth-free air still exists, engineered, filtered, guarded, and owned. You are at the gates of a new world, one built not by desperation, but by premeditation, and you are not welcome. Oases is just one of many such enclaves scattered across the globe. Some are corporate, others military. Most are built atop pre-existing infrastructure, deep inside mountains, below Arctic bunkers, beneath long-abandoned missile silos. The wealthiest saw the chemical catastrophe coming before the public even heard whispers, whether through insider leaks, private intelligence, or sheer paranoia. The ultra-rich prepared in silence, funding vast air purification projects under the guise of research and climate control. These havens are not survival shelters. They are engineered utopias, climate-controlled, dust-sealed, sterilized environments with air so pure it feels fake. Inside oases, the streets are spotless, lined with lead-lit walkways and micro-garden towers. Drones hum overhead. Screens project blue skies on ceilings. Children ride in silent pods to private education chambers. No one runs, no one screams, no one twitches. The people here are calm, clear-eyed, and deliberate. But behind their serenity is something colder, an emptiness carved by cost. Admission to these safe zones is not granted through merit. It is purchased with money, with influence, with blood. To enter, you must have value, something to trade that no one else possesses. Doctors, engineers, synthetic biologists, some were taken in during the early days to maintain systems, but most others were filtered by net worth, not need. Families were separated, whole communities of elites relocated in hours, leaving cities behind with not even a warning. Some people sold everything they owned just for a ticket. Others bribed their way in. Some offered their own children as labor in exchange for a sealed room. And even inside, safety is not free. The air may be clean, but every breath is tracked, every movement monitored. Oxygen levels are rationed. Behavior is enforced. Sleep cycles are regulated by internal light schedules. Conversation is recorded. Smiles are mandatory in public, and deviation is punished with exile. One woman who laughed for too long was taken away. A man who cried at his wife's memorial service was deemed emotionally unstable and escorted out. Another resident who refused to recite the morning affirmation, "Clarity is breath, order is peace, oases is life," was placed in isolation until he forgot what rebellion even meant. There are no prisons here, only recycling. Rumors swirl of sections beneath the arcologies, where those deemed defective are repurposed, organs harvested, memories wiped, skills redirected. One teenager who failed a psychological review vanished overnight, only to be seen weeks later working in a maintenance shaft, his eyes glazed, movements robotic. Whether they drugged him, reprogrammed him, or something worse, no one speaks of it. In Oasis, silence is survival. And yet, for all its horror, these havens function. The systems work. Crops are grown in vertical farms. Energy is generated by geothermal wells and fusion engines. Waste is vaporized. Clothing is 3D printed. Everyone has a role. Everyone is clean, but they are not free. The children born inside these havens do not know the outside world. They learn of it only through carefully crafted holographic lessons, the toxic age, the collapse of rational thought, and the gift of the dome. They are taught that the outside is chaos, that breathing uncontrolled air is suicide, and that their purity must be protected at all costs. They do not touch dirt. They do not hear birds. They do not know stars. And when they ask about those who live beyond the wall, they are told they chose this. Occasionally, outsiders attempt to reach the havens. Refugees in rags, eyes wild, children on their backs, holding signs scrawled with hope, "Please, my son," or "I remember, order." Most are turned away without a glance. Some are warned. Others are shot. Automated turrets line the outer perimeter, camouflaged in the terrain. Drones patrol the skies. Entry protocols are not negotiable, but sometimes people get in. Smugglers, traders, even cultists. Oasis has a black market, quiet and precise, operating in its underbelly. Air is currency. Clean water is power. There are entire floors hidden from the registry where synthetic lungs are sold to those whose bodies can no longer process contaminated oxygen. Others deal in altered memories, surgical procedures that erase the trauma of the outside in exchange for servitude. But even the elite cannot escape the shadow of the world outside. The filtration systems grow strained over time. Minute trace levels of meth particles have begun to appear in the outermost chambers. No symptoms yet, but anxiety is rising. Engineers work around the clock to patch leaks, seal microfractures, recalibrate drones. But they know the math. The air is persistent. It seeps. It waits. They cannot wall off the planet forever. The residents grow paranoid. Some start wearing masks indoors. Others request implants to monitor their blood in real time for contamination. One family barricades themselves inside their living quarters, demanding air delivered in steel canisters. Their daughter, 6 years old, begins drawing spirals on her walls. When questioned, she says, "The outside is calling." The leadership of Oasis, the board, responds with calculated measures. Curfews tighten. Mental health screenings intensify. Surveillance increases. Rumors emerge of internal purges, quiet disappearances of entire families suspected of exposure. Whispers of preemptive isolation protocols. No one is safe, not even here. You manage to get inside, just for 1 hour. A smuggler with a favor to call in lets you into a visitor unit. The air hits you like a slap, so clean it hurts. You breathe it in, weep involuntarily, feel your pulse steady, your mind clear. But even as your body rejoices, your heart recoils. Everyone here walks with purpose, but without warmth. Smiles are too practiced, conversations too quiet. It is a beautiful machine of survival, but the cost is clear. They have their minds, their order, their breath, but they are no longer human. You are escorted out before your hour ends. As the sealed gate closes behind you, you feel the old air return, buzzing, twitching, alive. Your head throbs, your thoughts blur, but strangely, you feel something here that was absent inside. Emotion, guilt, sadness, rage, humanity, in its broken, maddened form. You realize the people in the havens are not the lucky ones. They are the remnants of an obsolete world, frozen in time, holding their breath forever. Out here, in the chaos, the future is still being born, ugly and violent though it may be. But even the sealed domes cannot delay the inevitable. The air has changed the planet permanently. And in the final phase of this descent, we witness what happens when humanity itself dissolves, either by death or by transformation into something unrecognizable. You no longer know how long it has been since the air changed. Time has unraveled. The concept of days has collapsed into a blur of noise, heat, and movement. You can't remember what sleep feels like. You can't remember your parents' faces. You no longer mourn the world you came from because that world feels like someone else's dream. You are still alive, but only in the most technical sense. Your body moves, your lungs breathe, your eyes scan the world, but your mind is fracturing, one synapse at a time. You have reached the final stage of the meth-infested age, not a moment of mass death, but of slow, irreversible mutation. By now, civilization is only a memory. Buildings remain, but they are tombs filled with echoes. Governments have been reduced to myth, their flags used as rags or symbols painted onto the faces of tribal warlords. Languages have shattered into fragments, grunts, hums, screams, eye movements, body jerks. Entire dialects now exist without written form, evolving too fast to document. People do not speak to understand, they speak to react, to assert dominance, to communicate territory or surrender. But even language has started to matter less. In many places, communication is no longer verbal at all. It is chemical. People emit pheromones and recognize each other by scent, by breath pattern, by micro-behaviors, too fast for the untrained eye. What once were gestures of madness, twitches, spasms, compulsive blinking, have become meaningful rituals. These are not remnants of culture. These are the emergent behaviors of a new species forming under pressure, adapting not to survive the meth, but to become it. The human body has begun to change. In some regions, people's metabolisms have adjusted to tolerate the constant stimulant saturation. Heart rates that would once induce cardiac arrest are now normal. Some have developed extracapillary networks, enhancing blood oxygen distribution. There are cases of individuals surviving on 1 hour of micro-est per week, twitching violently in recovery, but awakening with their memories intact. But these adaptations come with a price. Emotions have withered. Affection has become dangerous. The human need for connection, hugging, holding, whispering, has been eroded by paranoia and overstimulation. The idea of love itself begins to seem quaint, like a childhood toy remembered but never touched again. Newborns are not held. Couples do not touch. Families are proximity-based units, not bonded by blood, but by usefulness and coordinated function. You encounter a group of survivors in what used to be a cathedral. They sleep upright, blinking in rotations. never fully shutting down. They feed intravenously, refusing to eat with their mouths because chewing causes too much noise. They have shaved their heads, covered their bodies in matte paint, and speak only when near death. When asked why, one replies, "Words wake the air." Human culture has splintered into grotesque reflections of what it once was. In a city square, in what used to be Lisbon, dozens of people gather every 12 hours to scream in unison. No meaning, just synchronized vocal output, an offering to the sky, or perhaps a coping mechanism to drown the hallucinations. In Alaska, a group worships a charred satellite dish, convinced it is a divine gateway. They offer blood to it in cups. In Central Africa, families no longer name their children. Instead, they give them rhythms, series of clicks and pulses that are felt rather than spoken. Names, they believe, confuse the brain. Technology has not saved anyone. Solar panels still power a few bunkers. Wind turbines spin in ghost towns. But without coordination, without purpose, tech has become ambient. Drones that still hover without orders. AI systems mumbling to themselves in server rooms. Warning lights flashing on empty dashboards. Some survivors worship these machines. Others destroy them. But none truly understand them anymore. The great arc of human progress, once measured in megabytes and milestones, has snapped under the pressure of neural decay. And yet, extinction has not come, not completely, because evolution is indifferent to morality or memory. It rewards adaptation, even if that adaptation is monstrous. Some humans have fused with the stimulant environment, not by resistance, but by surrender. These beings, no longer entirely human, have stopped twitching. They move with eerie stillness, walking in straight lines for hours, speaking only in numbers, consuming only air and trace minerals. Their pupils are pinpricks. Their heartbeats are erratic, but they do not age, they do not sleep, and they do not die easily. One such group is seen crossing a desert in northern India. 100 people in black rags, barefoot, silent, they walk in perfect formation. No leader, no tools, just movement. They stop for 12 minutes every sunrise, blink in unison, then continue. Satellite images show them carving a spiral path hundreds of kilometers wide across the wasteland. When researchers, what few remain, try to approach, they are turned away not by force, but by sheer presence. It felt like they weren't breathing, one scientist wrote, but the air around them was breathing them. These post-humans are not the future by choice. They are the consequence of biology pushed beyond its design. They are not a next step. They are a fallback protocol away for life to continue in a world that has lost all equilibrium. Meanwhile, the vast majority continue to deteriorate. The meth saturation in the atmosphere reaches critical levels. Filtration systems fail entirely. Trees collapse from internal chemical erosion. Birds fall mid-flight. Rain carries hallucinations like viruses. Even the moon begins to look different, not because it changes, but because no one can see it without interpreting patterns, threats, faces. You sit one night on the rooftop of a half-collapsed building, staring at a sky that used to guide sailors, poets, and dreamers. It now pulses. You see stars where there are none. You hear whispers in the wind. Somewhere below, someone is screaming again, high, keening, without end. You don't remember how long it has been since you spoke to someone. You don't remember your name. You no longer ask what is happening. You simply accept it. This is not death. This is not life. This is the final phase, where humanity ceases to exist as a collective species and fragments into individualized hallucinations drifting through shared space. Everyone is awake, everyone is aware, but no one is aligned, and the Earth, it continues, not in spite of us, but now, without us. Plants still grow, albeit mutated. Insects thrive in chaos. The oceans adjust. Fungi crawl across surfaces once dominated by machines. The biosphere does not mourn the fall of man. It breathes on, incorporating the chemicals, rewriting its own rules. In the end, the true horror is not that we died, it is that we changed. We adjusted to our own destruction. We adapted to madness. And in doing so, we ensured that nothing resembling the old human experience will ever return. You are not dead. You are something else. But now that you've seen this future, would you still choose to breathe the air of your own world, unaware of how close the edge truly is? In the final segment, we reflect on how this hypothetical might already be underway, and what, if anything, can still be done. You are back, not in the scorched cities or the twitching tribes, but here, watching a screen, breathing clean air, living in the illusion of normalcy. But something has changed. You notice it now, don't you? The quiet hiss of air conditioning, the faint trace of sweetness in the breeze, the momentary pulse in your temples that comes when you inhale too deeply. You wonder, what if the change had already begun? What if the scenario you just experienced isn't pure fiction, but a warning wrapped in metaphor? You think about the chemicals already in your environment, microplastics in your lungs, pollutants in your water, neurological shifts no one wants to talk about. Maybe you are not that far from the world you just saw. Maybe all it takes is one bad decision, one leak, one hack, one release, and everything you know crumbles. Not with a bang, but with a breath. This was never about meth alone. It was about dependency, about vulnerability, about how little control we truly have over the air we rely on every second of every day. The terrifying truth is that the collapse of humanity might not come through war or fire or famine. It might come invisibly, chemically, molecule by molecule, until the systems we built and the selves we protect dissolve into something unrecognizable. The line between sanity and collapse is thinner than you think, and sometimes all it takes to cross it is to keep breathing. So now, ask yourself, if the air turned against you tomorrow, what would you do? Where would you go? And most of all, would you even notice before it was too late? If this video made you think, if it made your skin crawl, or your imagination ignite, then subscribe now. We explore the futures you are never supposed to see, the ones you won't find in textbooks or headlines. Share this video with someone who thinks they're safe. Comment below. What would be your first move in a world where breathing means losing your mind? New nightmares drop every week. Stay alert, stay human, and remember, the future is already breathing down your neck.